Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Hello again, and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are and on whatever platform you are listening to us on. Now, if you go back into our podcast archives, you will have noticed that we did a teen mental health series where we talked to various mental health professionals and talked about the mental challenges and the mental struggles that our teenagers are going through and the ways that we can best help our teenage athletes. But it is also important that we take time for ourselves as well as the adults to make sure that we are balancing our own responsibilities in life and making sure that we are finding that correct balance between work as well as all of the other personal and other professional obligations that we have outside of coaching. And so we're going to dedicate this episode today on achieving that balance and the things that we need to keep in mind as coaches to make sure that we are the best version of ourselves for our players. So to help me do that, I'm very happy to be joined by Coach Greg Slade. Coach, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good, Coach. How about yourself?
I am doing quite well and really looking forward to talking about this because it's so easy to think about balance and make sure that our work life is balanced, and we're like, oh yeah, we'll make sure we have everything under control. But then, as we all know, life comes at us fast, and next thing you know, we're a little bit off balance. So it's really good to make sure we really spend some time on this topic. So Coach, let's start with you and your coaching journey and where basketball's taken you and kind of where you're at right now.
Absolutely. Well, again, my name is Greg Slade, and I'm the head coach over at Palmdale High School in Palmdale, California. We are going into my 6 years, the head coach of the program, but I've been at the school for a total of about 8 years now, if you include under levels. Prior to that, I'm actually a graduate of Palmdale High. I graduated with the class of 2003, which seems like forever ago now, but I remember it like yesterday. And once I left Palmdale High, I played all 4 years under Coach Gary Phelps at the time, the varsity level. And once I got out of high school, I went on to junior college at Antelope Valley College, where I played under Coach Newton Shillette. And went on to go put up we won a couple of conference titles and went on to play for the state championship. Unfortunately, we came up short, but after that year, I attempted to go transfer out and went to a small school out in Mount Vernon, Washington, called Skagit Valley College, with Roger Valentine as my coach. And after completing some credits there, tried to go on to the 4-year level and tried to go as a walk-on to Seattle Pacific University. But things didn't really work out there. I ended up coming home shortly after that and just kind of spent some time trying to figure out my next steps. Got a couple jobs here and there, working at grocery stores and whatnot. And then eventually I was out just kind of working out at a local gym. And a couple people saw me playing a little bit and thought that I had a shot at doing a tryout for the International Basketball League. It was based out of Portland, Oregon. So I got in touch with some of those people there, went there, and tried out, and ended up becoming a part of the Portland Chinooks basketball team for the International Basketball League, which kind of set me up to going toward some tour teams and looking to go overseas. And I pretty much chased that for about 6 or 7 years before meeting my wife, and things slowed down. I got into coaching, not really wanting to do it at first. I had the player's mentality, and I play, and that's what I am. And a friend of mine, my best friend actually, was coaching at Palmdale High at the time as the head varsity coach. And he had a need for a freshman coach and needed me to kind of step in, and just kind of on the strength of our friendship, I did it with no questions asked, and just kind of discovered a love and a passion for it from there. And, been at Palmdale High School ever since then. And, through all the ups and downs, have been able to work myself into being one of the longest tenure coaches that are there, despite not working on campus there. So it's been a fun ride so far.
It's always great to hear those stories of coaches who they go on these long winding journeys, and basketball and life takes them all these different places, and then they kind of end up back home and they end up back to kind of where it all started for them, and so that's great. I mean, clearly your journey has taken you quite a few different places. You've had quite a few opportunities, and one of the things that you mentioned that ties back into the theme of this episode is how things kind of slowed down a little bit once you got married and you started your life in that respect. And so that's going to be our focus for today is that balance and balancing all the things that life comes at you, and making sure that you're the best coach you can be, but also the best person and the best you that you can be. And with that, Coach, one of the things I know that is important to you is your faith. And so I know that we have some listeners who are believers and who practice various denominations of faith and various variations of faith. How has faith helped kind of shape your coaching and your coaching practices? How has it kind of been a guide for you in your coaching?
Oh man, I think that's a great question. I think faith for me has been the foundation in pretty much every major decision that I've had, and I found that the times where I didn't take my faith seriously in a decision being made, it ended up kind of being the wrong choice for me personally. And I had to learn pretty much how to find that relationship and develop it over time. From a child at age 6, I got my first Bible from my grandmother as a birthday gift, and without really understanding what it was, I still have that same Bible to this day. I still go to it, to read scripture and pray often. As far as it shaping the way that I coach, it definitely it serves its purpose in creating an avenue to speak with my players, to allow them to kind of see that they too have the opportunity to have an ability to have a level of faith or develop their faith with their relationship with God and higher power. And even though working for public school, I know it's not always the main thing that's promoted, but there's a place for it in all our individual lives. I feel it allows me to it allowed me to pretty much go and sit back and seek a wife. As it says in the Bible, it's good for a man to find a wife. It's a good thing, and in doing that, that's helped me kind of bring balance and find balance, as well as within coaching and within our personal lives. So faith has been huge, man. It's been a great thing that's been present in my life that is very much real. Is something I emphasize to the youth as well as my fellow coaches.
Yeah, I 100% can understand the way that if you are a believer and if you practice, how much that you can draw strength and inspiration and motivation from, as you said, various scriptures and various readings, or just the philosophies that are put forth in different religious works. And so to add on to that, for younger coaches, let's say in this hypothetical situation here, we have a younger coach who's practicing their faith, and they're getting into coaching, and what are some of the moments, or what are some of the things you think that are gonna, I'm not gonna say test their faith, but are gonna put them in situations where they might get stressed out, or they might get a little frustrated, and they might need to really draw inspiration from their faith? Can you think of some moments in a young coach's coaching career where that might happen?
Yeah, especially working in public school, you have a change of leadership. Often here in California, we have, our administrators, they change every 2 to 3 years. And so with new personalities, sometimes come new challenges. As far as being effective at running the program, there may be certain things that you've been used to doing, or as you kind of come up the ranks, you've learned that this is how we run a program. But new admin or new voice in the athletics department or principal of the school may choose to go a different direction, not hold athletics as to such a high standard. And so some of those things you may have to balance on your own in order to keep the standard. Also, kind of going to bat for yourself and what you believe in. And then I also think too, success sometimes is a big tester of your faith, because you put work in and you do things to find success with one class, but the same things that you did with one class may not work for the next class. So it's important as you develop as a coach that your culture develops. And I find that being faithful in what your approach is, and not only your work, but seeking the Lord as your Savior, it brings a sense of calmness and being able to adapt and deal with those situations as they come.
And I really like that you brought up the situation of the turnover, because that is going to be something that is prevalent in a young coach's career, or if you're a teacher. I know a lot of coaches are teachers. It made me think of my own experience. This currently right now is my 8th year teaching, and I have had 8 principals. And now part of that is my own changing of jobs, and part of it is they moved on to other positions as well, and so absolutely, you have to be patient. You have to be flexible and understand that maybe the vision that you had that worked under that one administrator, athletic director, that vision might have to be changed a little bit, not necessarily changing who you are as a person, but maybe having to rework a few things in order to be better aligned with what they want. And I think that again ties into the theme of this episode of understanding that these changes at work might disrupt that balance a little bit, and might add a little bit more stress. And those are things that we'll definitely have to be aware of. And so with that, I want to start kind of on a more basic general sense with you, because you are a coach, you are a husband, you are a father, and I know that you have other responsibilities that you do besides that. I guess my first general question, Coach, is how do you do it? How do you handle it to be the best coach, the best father, the best husband? How are you able to try and be the best of all of those things that you can be?
Well, I think first and foremost, as a husband, right? That I think is a lifelong thing. That's a lifelong commitment that is established and forever changing. So while when I think that I have it all together, my wife wants to upgrade the car or the house somehow or something like that, right? So you have to find peace within that, as well as having the ability to communicate openly and clearly. With that said, also as a father, it's a little bit easier when they're younger. It's only so much that they can do, but as they age and they get older, new challenges come for them too. While your position sometimes as a coach may even highlight who you are or is a part of you, you as a dad kind of comes before all of that, and just like you as a husband comes before any and everything as well. But I think as the main thing that I kind of do that helps balance all three of those is I delegate a lot to my staff. I have been fortunate to be able to work with an outstanding athletic director in Jeff Williams. He's been in that position the last 20 years at our school, so he's pretty savvy at making sure that things are scheduled correctly and all of those things, and communicating with me on that end. I delegate a lot of small tasks to my assistant coaches, who I've been thankful that in the last year or so I've been able to develop quite a bit of rapport, and with that responsibility, a lot of trust with them, which has allowed me more time with my family as our family changes. I think the dynamics shift often in families as we age. I'm 35 years old, so it's a lot more responsibility in terms of my contribution to the family overall, not just to my own family, but not my own immediate family, but the family outside of that, as far as in-laws and
right.
My mom and dad as well. Is just being able to make myself available to them. Sometimes basketball has to come second, and understand the importance of scheduling. Scheduling has been huge, with making sure that I set aside that time to step away from the game in order to create the time frames for my family, whether that be for vacations or just, finding time throughout the season. One thing I do is I'm sure a lot of coaches, when I was young, even I used to love practice on the weekends because you have almost all day, Saturday to kind of work out. Well, I started to find that was kind of running its course and running its course thin with my wife because she works as well, right? And I'm not really around during the week to really touch base with her or reconnect with her. And the only time that we have was weekends. So I started to move our practices to later times in the evening times during the week to spend as much time as we can working on our game, working on our game plans and stuff like that effectively without interruption. And the trade-off would be Saturday morning, I'm waking up and we could have breakfast or, have some coffee together and spend some quality time together. And that's been huge, as well as just her own understanding of who it is that she married as well, being in tune with who our spouse is, not only to us, but what they represent and what they do folds into their character, as a person individually. So it's allowed for great support.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned that I think it's really, really important to emphasize and dive a little bit into, as you mentioned a couple times, delegation. And so I know that either we have coaches listening who are potentially going to be spouses or parents soon, or we also have veteran coaches who may be looking to give that advice to younger coaches who might be in that situation. So when it comes to delegation, what did you find were things that you could do away with? I know a lot of coaches like they want to do everything, but obviously as more responsibilities in your personal life come to you, there are going to be things that you have to delegate, like you said. So what were those things that you delegated to your staff and let them take care of?
Well, one thing that was huge for us was like the planning before games, like say like team meals, stuff like that before we would go play. I would have a structure and we would rotate it. So that made it much easier for me to handle instead of me being a person having to go and figure out, hey guys, let's go get sandwiches or let's go get things before the varsity takes the floor to eat, because majority of the time we're leaving the campus at about, I don't know, like 1 in the afternoon, sometimes 2 in the afternoon before school lets out. They've been in class all day and hadn't really eaten much. And so, we were finding that they were having a hard time in games to kind of keep their focus with games starting at 6 p.m. They're just in the gym, just kind of hanging out and not really finding energy. And one of my assistant coaches actually took the onus one day of saying, Coach, I'm going to start bringing the snacks. Well, then we went forward and we made a whole schedule of what we could do, what we could bring, the things that would maximize their energy. And we had it down to the time that they even eat, what could they eat at what time, and making sure that each of us, played a role in that. And so that was one thing, was just to rotate a schedule of who's bringing what, and making sure the players were on board with their times to eat and when was a good time for them to maximize that energy that they could create from that food. But
and with that, it sounds like in that situation that you had people in your staff who are willing to kind of step up and take some of those responsibilities. And I think that kind of goes back into something that's been talked about in a couple interviews here, which is that, use your staff, and if they're willing and able and they're eager to do something and they're eager to take that responsibility off of your shoulders to go ahead and empower them to do it. And it sounds like that's worked out really well for you. Absolutely.
And I think too, as I've been blessed to be a head coach, but a friend of mine, he told me a long time ago, when you look to hire an assistant coach, you really want to hire the qualities that may make him a head coach someday. So a lot of times those things are about taking onus over a situation, no matter how big or small, or showing some leadership skills and then developing that within there. So I definitely think delegating the responsibilities to them, as well as allowing them to be them, not necessarily micromanaging. Just making sure that they have the confidence in themselves to do it, through the trust that we give them. I think that's what helps, them kind of be able to buy in into what it is that the overall needs, for the program. So I definitely think using your staff is huge, but they have to have the buy-in just like players, and have your support just like players do.
Yeah, absolutely, and they have to feel just like your players, your assistants and your staff. They need to feel like they're a part of it too, and then that they can, in some respects, put their own stamp on something and feel like they're just as much a part of the team, and they're have influence and they have a say as well. So 100% agree that makes total sense. And another thing that you mentioned in your answer, which I think is really interesting, is you mentioned about how your spouse kind of knew what your job entailed in terms of basketball coaching. How important has your wife been in helping you along with your journey? And I guess in addition to that, for coaches, let's say who are single, and they're looking for somebody who's going to kind of support them on their journey, what is your wife able to kind of help you with, and what are some of the things that she kind of knows kind of come with your territory in being a basketball coach?
Well, I would say this especially first for like the younger coaches looking for a spouse. One of the big things that really impacted me and my wife on our journey together was the availability of premarital counseling. My father-in-law has suggested it. He's also a pastor in a church. And at the time, I had never really sat down with any counselor, but we were really open to figuring out what it was really about. And what it really did was it opened my eyes as well as my wife's eyes as far as what it was that kind of helped shape us up to that point in dealing with one another. I met my wife when I was 25 years old. She was 26, so she was a year older than me, but it really kind of came to a head and allowed us to really open up about some of the things we were feeling as far as what it was we saw our life like in the future, and had to realize too that 25 years had gone by before I had met her. That's a long time. That's a lot of me that's kind of there that she's going to have to kind of cipher through and filter through in order to kind of bring some balance and figure out our positions within the marriage. But that was huge for us as a first stepping stone. And I recommend that for any young coach or any young man, any young couple in general, just being able to sit down with somebody who doesn't know either one of us, but from the outside looking in can challenge us and in ways that we didn't really think. One of the things that I learned about my wife was how important family was to her, considering the way that she grew up. She overcame a lot of adversity in her life, and had a really strong relationship with her father. And one of the family values within that was keeping the family together, having regard for everybody that was involved in the family, whether that was you as a child versus you as an adult, or aunties, uncles. The same could be said for my family. I came from a 2-parent household. My mom and my dad both, raised us in a pretty big family outside of us. And, so those two things were a mutual fit for us as a couple. So for us to kind of be effective within our roles in the family, we wanted to make sure we were happy doing what it was that we were doing to provide for our family. And my wife, she started early. She got a position out of high school seminary at age 18, working with a bank, and slowly but steadily had moved up and has been moving up for the last 18 years. And she pretty much locked in on her career, that's what, she wanted to do. When she met me, I was kind of toward the tail end of traveling around, trying to figure out how long I could play overseas or not. And it was just kind of coming off of a tour through South America. And I had seen the world a little bit, but, you always chase that goal. And for the first time, I was coming off of an injury that really kind of made me put some things in perspective. And I knew I loved my wife, but I also knew that I loved basketball. And one day she just sat me down and said, like, well, I think you got to have something, because you have a natural competitive spirit. You have a natural ability to talk to others, and you seem, kind of extroverted in a way.
Yeah.
where you can you adapt and you use your network often. And I think that you should really take coaching seriously. And at that time, I was just kind of like, no, I don't really want to have to deal with the parents. I don't want to have to really, deal with the responsibility of running a program. I just like, I like player development, but I could do that and be helpful in certain capacity. But one of the things in my walk in life that really also affected that too was coming up in high school, not really having a strong sense of direction after graduation of high school. I was just kind of going on my ability to play basketball, not really tapping into what my purpose was, and I think that it changes over time. But at that particular moment, I didn't. And my wife and I sat down as we were discussing kind of what I wanted to do. She just was like, you were at that age in high school where you were trying to figure yourself out. Who better than to kind of be an example to help others do that and help other families understand the steps needed, because in your failures could be someone else's triumphs, And after that, was kind of said that really put my mind at ease. Okay, this is really where I kind of can find my niche, so to speak. And so early on, while she was motivating, it definitely took its toll. It was times where we had to figure out balance. We had times where season starts usually for us were winter sports. And my wife was born November 29th, which is the same day as my mother, actually.
Oh, wow.
So that's quite a big thing. But yeah, November 29th, oftentimes we were starting season in a tournament on the 28th of November, usually around Thanksgiving time. And so she would kind of come secondary to that for the first few years I was coaching. And it really would bother her because that was her day, And even though I might send flowers or what have you, she didn't have me there. And so I eventually had to figure a way to take more control, more ownership of my position in the program, which was scheduling games or doing things to work around that. And I've been blessed. Like I said, my athletic director totally supported that, totally supported me finding that balance that way, and allowed me to basically control our schedule, from that point on. So that was big. And then also communicating about what it is that we have going on. She gets a schedule just like the players do, of what our games are, where they're going to be at. I FaceTime my son all the time when we're on away games, and I try and show him the gym or show him, what I got from the snack bar. Like, hey, son, I got some nachos today. They had hot dogs over here, or they had chips over there. They're your favorite kind of Cheetos. I'll bring you some home, that type of thing, to make them feel a part of it in the game where they can't be at. And then, of course, she's been more open to coming to the games where she could come to, and making sure that, us as a united front of support is there. And I'd like to think that comes from the way she was brought up in her family. And I'm able to recognize it because of the way I was brought up in my family. And that's kind of where we make a perfect match.
Right. And the thing that you mentioned about her birthday, I think is a really good point to touch on in the fact that when basketball season starts, especially with how busy it is, I feel like it's really easy for us to get really wrapped up in our work, and a lot of times we may have great significant others or spouses who understand that and who are aware that basketball season gets really busy, but at the same time it's not like an excuse to just do nothing in terms of nurturing your personal relationships. And that, yes, it seems like your wife and your family are understanding of how busy that season gets, but that's not like an excuse for you just to completely devote yourself to that and be completely neglecting all the other things that obviously enrich and make your life complete.
Right. No, absolutely. It's and it's a bit of a balance. My youngest son's birthday is in the summer, right? And most of the times basketball, it can be year round, with player development going in the summertime. And so the importance of scheduling, communicating that schedule, not just the basketball schedule, but what's the birthday plan schedule? What's the Thanksgiving schedule? What's going on? So that way I can get it from all ends and be able to really honestly, assess what it is that we can do. And there will be times where we can't do but like you said, it doesn't mean that things just kind of just go by the wayside just because we're in basketball season.
Mm-hmm.
We got to wear many hats. And I think, too, it also makes great for an example for what it is that we're trying to teach our kids, coming up in our program. In basketball, it's the one sport where you have to do everything. You've got to be an offensive threat and a defensive player.
Right.
You've got to be able to rebound and shoot. You've got to, you got to be able to communicate, and you got to be able to hold yourself to a high standard in terms of sportsmanship. So you're not talking too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to be able to find balance in all of it. And so if we're trying to show our kids on the court how to do that, who better to exemplify that than their coach?
Yeah, no, 100% guaranteed. And you just brought a quick story to mind that I thought of that I heard once, and that was a coach was talking about how I think it was a practice right before a really important game. So there was a practice, and the head coach, he left early to go attend, I believe it was something with his daughter's birthday. And this was, a really important practice right before like some important game. And that coach said, he said, my responsibility is to help raise good, strong young men. And his message was, I don't want my players to think that it's okay to neglect something like your daughter's birthday growing up for something like basketball. And I remember that story, and it's always stuck with me because, it's about what's important to you, and that if you want to be that role model, like we've talked on a couple times, you have to walk that walk with your actions and have your players see that, like coach is actually spending time away from this basketball with me because of the importance that family is to them. And I think that was a great message. It made me think of that story, and I think that's just so true.
Absolutely. Yeah, very powerful.
And kind of with that, when you are in basketball mode, so when you are in practice mode or coaching mode, whether it's in a game or in practice, because of the fact that you have these other responsibilities, when you are focusing in on being that coach, it's really important to be the most efficient that you can possibly be and kind of get the most out of that time that you are coaching, because like you said, you've done away with some of those practices that you used to. So when it comes to your coaching practices, how has that sort of changed over time to where you feel like you're getting the absolute most that you can out of your time when you're focusing in on coaching?
Well, I think that one big thing, that's where I think faith comes in again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share a short story. I have a son who's 13 years old. And at the time he was 12, he was in 8th grade. Without saying too much, he basically was kind of being defiant towards the teacher, which was kind of uncharacteristic of him.
Mm-hmm.
But, kids are going to be kids, and he tried it this time. And I didn't find out about it until right before practice started. And this is before, an important game for us. We win, we get into the playoffs. But my son needed to kind of be addressed. And so I had a very short conversation with him and just pretty much told him, I understand what happened, and I'll deal with it when I get home, and hung up the phone, turned the phone off. And when I say faith comes in, there's a level of conviction that, comes with things happening when we choose, the wrong choice, or we do something we shouldn't do. And sometimes as kids, when they don't want to be in trouble with their parents, they want to overcome that feeling by explaining as much as possible and saying whatever they can say to kind of get dad on my side or mom on my side.
Mm-hmm.
And, so sometimes it's like, no, you have to sit there and deal with those feelings internally, emotionally, and just kind of let the Lord do his work with you. So that when I do come home with you and I do present your consequences, we know that this took all three parties. This took you, this took me, and this took where our faith lies, for us to get through it together. But generally, my policy is no phones for the students, really, while we're practicing. And I try to live by that too. I keep mine on silent rather than turn it off, but I do have the periodic checks during like water breaks and stuff like that, where I'll check just to make sure things are going okay, and just, make sure that my wife didn't add anything to the honeydew list. you know,
Yeah.
bring home some orange juice or some milk or something like that,
Uh-huh.
because it might be vital for what we having for dinner or who
Right.
knows, but so I definitely try to keep it, but with that turning it off and trying to keep it on silent, they also, are aware too that, hey, dad's in practice or, husband's in practice right now. So um, with that, I try to just kind of plan my practices as to the T as I can. Obviously, there's those times where the kids are going to kind of come up short and we got to teach and have teaching moments, rather than the practice of it, and show them over and over again one concept. And that means, being flexible within our scheduling too, because things come up for them as well. You go into practice sometimes to figure that you're going to have the whole team. And just when you thought you were, oh, coach, mom's sick and I got to take care of little sis. So I'm pretty open about making sure that, hey, bring your sibling with you, have them come with you, come to practice with us, build a rapport with the family that way, as well as with
Yeah.
our players to show the support of the program for them as individuals as well.
Yeah, no, that makes makes a lot of sense, in that you have to be flexible with your players, and you have to be understanding of the situations that they're going through, and I like what you mentioned about really focusing in on when you're in practice, like you're in practice, and that's where your attention lies, and making sure that it's not drifting into other areas, which is difficult, which is hard, but doing the best you can to make sure that you're just present and as active and as engaged in that moment that you're coaching as you possibly can be. And so with that as kind of an additional question, are there things that maybe on the court that you might do that you think are like the best use of your players' time? Like I'm thinking of maybe more in like practice situations where are there things that maybe you do in practice now that you feel like are the best use of your time, and maximizing that time that you have with your players?
Um, I would say really just like practice planning. Also, like we talked about, we mentioned earlier, delegation
Hmm.
of certain drills for coaches to do, certain drills for our captains or seniors to lead. As maybe say like the beginning of practice, generally during the warm up, I leave that up to my captain and to my seniors to kind of lead the warm up. So that will include about a 15-minute warm up of stretches and opening drills with layups or passing drills, that type of thing, as every days. And we mark those as this is our every days to sharpen up our tools. And I always call it tightening the screws. I always use the analogy of like a table. A table sits on its legs, its four legs for it to be a table. But
Hmm.
the thing that holds it all together most times on most tables are the screws. That if those screws weren't present, the table can no longer be a table,
Right.
right? It's just now it's just a pile of wood. So you've got to kind of hit on those every days, and I really hit on those usually with leadership in mind, and making sure that our seniors and our captains usually are kind of the head of that, and making sure that they go smoothly. It also lets me know too what the locker room standard is, for our guys in terms of a couple missed layups. Is somebody going to say something, or does coach have to go out there on the court and kind of discipline things? Who's going to kind of take ownership of the floor? Because that comes in handy in those tight moments when we're playing in games. So, but that's one huge one that I really have adapted to over the years. That really has been a good vehicle for us to kind of start practices
Mm.
with, and involve the team that way.
It sounds like too that helps the players have more buy-in if they have more kind of control and more leadership on some of the things that maybe take place in practice, or some of the standards that your team holds themselves to. And it sounds like not only is it a benefit for you because you get to take some of that responsibility and delegate it to them, but then the players, it seems like they would also feel more engaged, and they would be maybe a little bit more invested if they know that they have some say in the way things are run.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, the buy-in is definitely there from them. They are excited to kind of be looked at and depended on. I think as kids kind of grow and they get to the high school level, so much of them is within their social identity at school that it's hard for them to develop a level of independence early on, say freshman year, sophomore year. By the time they're juniors, they've kind of figured out school. They kind of figured out their niche, what their social identity is, so to speak. And the next steps for them are essentially manhood. And so with that kind of being in place for us, we found that kind of supports that, and it also promotes that for them. To think independently, think with the intention of others being in mind, and making sure that you're doing it not just any kind of way, but you're doing it the right way. And so that kind of leads to my next point of being disciplined comes before freedom. Well, you have to learn first, and how you do something. You don't go drive a car and someone says turn left, you can't turn right to make a left turn, right? So it's like you have to do it this way. This is the way it gets done. And by the time most of our guys reach junior year, going into senior year, they've had 2 to 3 years of developing their level of discipline for things. So that way, when their time comes as a captain sitting in that seat, or as a senior on the brink of graduation, they're more than ready to go in and follow suit.
Yeah, no, love it. Absolutely. It just has a lot of added benefits, and gives them the buy-in, like you said. It kind of teaches them that leadership, and kind of it gives them that ownership, and then also it takes a little bit off of your plate, so that it's not you as the one who's completely in control. So makes a lot of sense to me. Shifting to games and game situations, I know that one of the things that is a challenge is, let's talk about on the court in terms of the way that you sort of conduct yourself, and the way that you coach, and the way that you kind of handle things in a game. I've heard from a few coaches that they've kind of shifted their demeanor, or shifted the way that they act, or at least more mindful of the way that they act, when they know that maybe their family's watching, or they know that they're they just don't want to necessarily take all of that stress, or whatever the case may be, home with them. How have you sort of changed, if at all, like maybe your demeanor or your behavior as a coach, knowing that you're also a father, and you're a husband, and you serve those sort of roles as well?
Right. Well, in my situation, as a young coach, I was extremely fiery, extremely, competitive,
Yep,
I'll
of
say,
course.
and to the point where I would challenge almost any call. It didn't matter. I wanted to go my way,
Yeah, it's the
but I
player
also,
in you.
yeah, and it was very. What I started to find was, one, what was it doing to my team when I would get like that, showing that demonstrative attitude toward things, and one of the things that really started to kind of come apparent was it allowed room for excuse for the kids on the team, for one. Oh, coach is mad because they're not making any calls. Well, it's on the refs. That's why we lost. And it's like, no, well, we also didn't, we didn't have to turn the ball over 27 times either. That could have offset the win too, or the loss too. We would have been able to kind of compete and be more competitive too. So as I grew older, I started to grow, out of that, and start trying to, conduct myself a little bit more professionally. The fire inside is kind of what drove me. Yeah. And it's good. And it's a time and a place for it. One of the things that sticks out is again, within my faith, is serving the season. Serve until you can't serve. There's times where you are gonna be down and out, or times where you are taking a loss, or you're losing games and you're trying to figure it all out. You still got to be accountable to your position. You still got to be accountable to the seat that you claim and that has your name on it, because it's there for you to serve others. So taking into account all of the things that I'm doing may also affect what is coming out of my team and being portrayed on the court. So over the years, I have had to kind of tame it down. It also meant I had to become sharper and become a better coach. I've had the pleasure of coaching against some coaches who've coached, for decades now, and have accumulated hundreds of wins, and have seen their best teams, and just really they've kind of opened the doors here in our league to be mentors, and answer any questions, even in the heat of competition, or having things, just traditional, what's the word I'm looking for, where we're having just each year there are rivals, so to speak, and,
Right.
and kids feel that energy there.
Yep.
There's not it's not necessarily a personal thing amongst us coaches, and even though, yeah, we want to win, I want to beat you, you want to beat me, but so that's watching the guys older than me, being able to reflect on myself, being able to talk with college coaches, my own college coaches, and really kind of see, it's like, yeah, you over the years have to sharpen your tools, because the game is forever changing. It's not played the way it was back in 1970 anymore. So with that change means, well, if the game is changing, what makes you think as a coach you don't have to change? And so that really kind of opened my eyes. And so even then, like you mentioned, having the family there and being present. In my situation, my wife, like I mentioned, she also works too.
Yep.
And so there's oftentimes games where she won't be there, unless we have to kind of, there's times she'll want to come to specific games, like those rivalry games, that she just loves, that atmosphere. But in those games, I'm definitely locked in, and definitely myself, because there's a time, for that. And the time for coaching is to be that. I'm aware of, representing my family, so to speak, but at the same time, it's like, hey, they're here to watch me coach this basketball game too.
Yep.
And, the way my family is too, is like, they're a competitive bunch too. So if you don't win, you're going to go to dinner after and hear about it and say, hey, you could have made this adjustment here on the press, or,
Oh yeah.
why'd you leave number 5 in so long? You started missing after a while, that type of stuff. So
I love those stories. I love the stories of the coaches who talk about, going to dinner with their spouse, and their spouse is huge into basketball, and they're, critiquing all the adjustments. Like, why didn't you switch to this or do this?
Yep,
That's
exactly.
funny. Yeah, no, absolutely. But it sounds like with your demeanor now, in the way that you handle things, and just kind of just being like calmer in general, it has to, I imagine, it has to help with not bringing all of that like with you, like when you're done coaching and when you're going home, because I can't imagine for some of the coaches who I know who get really fired up and then they get really into it. For some of them, I know, like, it's hard to kind of get that off switch when they're, going home the night after a tough game or things like that. So it just seems like this also kind of helps you just remain calm to the point where you're not like taking all this stress and all this anxiety with you when you go home, and you're kind of doing the best you can to kind of leave it within your coaching confines on the court.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's times where it's easier said than done at times. There's certain games or just certain things that happen in a game where you go through your mind as a coach and say, oh, we could have adjusted here. I could have came out the zone there, so to speak. But I also think like that's the importance of your routine. Just like we have a routine to warm up for a game and then actually go through the game and play it. Everything is routine after the game too. From how long our speech is going to be with the guys, depending on what happened in that game, to making sure we get into, not just any old meal, but even a healthy meal sometime, after the game, to wind down. And then even then, you still may have the adrenaline pumping. So I choose to get on video games. I'll get on NBA 2K 20 or 21, whatever I can, and I'll run a few games online before heading to bed. And, sometimes that I find that kind of gives me my basketball fix while also dealing with that extra from the aggression and feelings associated with the game as it finished. So
yeah, I think it's just important to have something have something that if if you're stressed out or whatever. Like for me, I know, like if I had a rough game and it just didn't go the way I wanted, like I'm going to do whatever I can to not dwell on it or think about it. I'll read a book. I'll do something, but like I don't I don't have the right frame of mind to really process what happened because I'm just emotionally not ready for that. And knowing that, I know that, okay, I got to do something else, and that tomorrow with a fresh set of eyes and after sleeping on it, I probably have a better idea to actually critique myself and figure out what happened there. But the night of, like, no, for me, like, no way would I be able to do that. So yeah, it sounds like you have yours in video games, and yeah, I think it's just important to have something so that you're not letting it consume you. Absolutely.
Yeah, that I think too, debriefing with your staff too is
Yeah.
huge too. That always helps with the times you need to vent, and also get some fresh eyes and ears on the situation on how they may do something to offset it the next time. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Having just that outlet, having somebody to talk to and kind of process it. And even if it's just like knowing that there are things to talk about, like, oh, we got to talk about this, and this, but we can talk about it tomorrow. Like, all right, at
right,
least like
right.
it has a place, and that conversation will take place, but it doesn't need to happen at that moment. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 100% agreed. All right, Coach. Two parts to this one here is my final question. First, how has being a father and a husband, how has that made you a better coach in terms of just the way that you conduct your coaching practices? How has being a father and husband made you just overall? How's it made you a better coach?
Man, I think it's really allowed me to look at the perspective um, on some of what the kids that I'm coaching may go through.
Hmm.
I know the type of provider that I am for my family, but here at Palmdale, the demographic may not do or be capable of doing what I do for my family.
Yeah.
So it's really made me and kind of opening my eyes as far as what it is that we have to deal with on our team and then within our program day in, day out. It's also allowed me to kind of be more patient, with my own kids as these guys develop, taking some of those coaching philosophies of, the development and allowing the player to kind of become the player. I've always kind of stated that, coaches don't make players, players make players. The coaches just kind of use what the players made themselves into. The
Yeah.
coaches may give the player the blueprint, but it's always up to the player to do the work. And so it's the same thing with my own kids. I feel I can show my sons the brighter sides of life, so to speak. Right? We might have a nice car, we might have a nice house and things like that, but at the end of the day, that's where they grew up at. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's their house.
Hmm.
At some point they're going to have to figure out for themselves how to provide for themselves. And so to do that, sometime you might need to be patient with them and allow them to develop their minds and their wants and go through their challenges, whether that be emotionally or sometimes, physically, psychologically, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But showing that same patience toward my own family's helped tremendously. And then also just uh, the concept of legacy within a family as it applies to us coaching our programs and the legacy that a rich alumni will have, and that helps feed the culture in another way. And it gives the guys that are currently going through the program a chance to see what it was that came from the guys before them.
Yeah.
That was something that I learned early, even in growing up. I didn't quite understand it. I used to, as a player, I used to look at the guys that would come back to the program to visit, whether invited by coach or not, and just kind of be like, well, I'm glad you're here, so I came to come beat you. I'm ready to play ball against you and
Yeah.
make it competitive. But overall, what coach was kind of showing us was that it doesn't matter where you go or where the game takes you, you're always going to be home here. This is always going to be considered the Palmdale basketball family, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so within that, it's like, yeah, you come to the realization once you have your child that, wow, mortality is real. I'm literally looking at my legacy that I one day will leave behind, and
Right.
what is that? What is my work going to say for that? We see that in our faith in the Bible. The Lord's Son did the same thing for us. So it's like we have a responsibility to that with what it is that we do. And like I said, serving in our season. it's just one of those things that really kind of came full circle for me once I became a father of my own kids,
You're right.
and being a husband, making sure that as young teens, you have prom, you have
Mm-hmm.
winter formal, those types of things, homecoming dances. Um, how are you conducting yourself as a young man around young women and young ladies, right? Making sure that you are touching on the things to be respectful and be responsible, because things can go left or things can go right. It's up to you and how you conduct yourself. What's your attitude towards it?
Yeah.
And letting my marriage kind of be the example of that. And showing them those times where, man, my wife got on my nerves today because she keeps adding to the honeydew list. And I could have swore I got water the last 3 days for, or orange juice the
Yeah.
last 3 days, whatever it may be. But always showing the value that it's us together making those decisions, and us together is what it takes for those decisions to be carried out. So when you do find a girl you date at that age or whatever it may be, you still have a responsibility to conduct yourself accordingly in order for it to thrive
Mm.
and for you to get, your goal of graduation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's all of that makes a lot of sense, and then the part that especially that rang true to me was the part about the legacy and the the values and the morals that you sort of instill and leave behind and pass on to the next generation. Yeah, that in particular resonated with me. And then really quickly on the other end, if there's anything you have to add to that, how is coaching helped make you a better husband and father? So how's the game of basketball and coaching basketball helped you in that respect?
Well, it's really helped me really lock in and become disciplined to the needs of my family, in any capacity, whether that's to serve as a son to my father and mother, or serve as a husband to my wife or father to my kids.
Mm.
But it's allowed me to really understand the purpose of the discipline needed in order for us to continue to thrive as a family. I mentioned earlier that I dropped out of school, dropped out of college, to pursue my personal goal of wanting to become a professional basketball player. And then once I achieved that and got paid, it was kind of like, now what? And not really taking into account that I needed to one day go back and get that education. I had my mom and dad. Thankfully, they were supporting me and they were very much in my ear. You're gonna get your education, son. But eventually, once I had my own family and had my own coach, I was like, you know what, I can't be a coach who I'm trying to get kids to go to college, but I don't have a college degree. I've never finished that. And in terms of what does that do for our legacy? Well, what does it say? Each generation is supposed to be better than the previous one.
Hmm.
Well, if the least I did was go get a master's degree, then the kids after me have to at least match it, right? My kids have to at least match what I did to become better than me and give themselves a chance to be better than me. They have to at least match it. So that always resonated with me as a theory and a thought. And I was just kind of like, well, I need to make sure that I'm able to lock in and do those things. So got back in school, coming up on graduation, that type of thing, for myself to set that standard and solidify that and become more of a well-rounded individual to my family, in any capacity. So
Hmm.
coaching has helped me identify that. It's also helped me, like I said, be able to have the discipline necessary to balance it. Knowing when to say no to certain things and also when to say yes, and when to make sure that we can uh, we can accommodate all parties as best we can.
Right. And just the part about, discipline and structure and all the organizational things that are needed to be the best coach that you can be, all of those things can really easily translate into other areas of your life, and having, like you said, that discipline and that understanding of when the right time is to do something, and if you are going to do something, to apply yourself fully to it, whether that's in your professional or personal life. Yeah, that definitely makes sense, and it's definitely something I think we can all get on board with, hopefully. That's great. So to wrap up, Coach, what I would like to do is I would like for you to think back to a particular coaching moment that you've had in your career, and I'm sure you've had many. Is there a particular coaching moment of yours that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think one big thing is about perseverance, and doing what's necessary to fulfill the desires that you have within your heart. Um, that's a big one. I look back as I'm thinking about it, and in Psalm 37, it talks about how, you delight yourself in God, and he'll definitely grant you the desires of your heart. And in delighting, that kind of resonates with me, because I don't think of desires like a short term thing. I think of it as a thing that kind of consumes you. And I had one player in particular, by the name of Sam Caldwell. He's actually going to be a senior for us this year. His freshman year, he came into high school. He struggled with grades, struggled with um, some different things off the court. Family life was in the process of coming together, and he's just starting high school, which is always a tough transition for most guys. And we hosted a tryout, and first day of tryouts, he comes over to me and he says, Coach Slade, I want to come try out for you. And we take a look at his grades, and we knew off top he wasn't going to make the grades, at that cut. So we let him go early and just told him, hey man, you're not going to make grades for the first half of the season. But I said, if you get your stuff right in the second half of the season's open and we have some spots open up, we'll take a chance on you and see about you playing freshman ball. Well, he says, okay, Coach Slade, I'll do what I can do. Every day that we had practice, from that point on, we usually started right after school, about 3:00. Sam would come to our practice and he would watch. And he would ask if he could sit in the bleachers, and he'd sit at the top of the bleachers and he would watch freshman practice, JV practice, and varsity practice. And he did this the entire first semester. His grades slowly got up, and then finally, once we did the grade check for the second semester, we had a couple guys who flunked off, but Sam made grades. And so I had a talk with him. I spoke with his mom. I let him know, pretty much where we stood. And he was able to come in and finish the season as a freshman. He went on to continue to play. His sophomore year, he makes the varsity team. He gets all league honors as a sophomore. Last year, he was third overall scoring in our league, and he made all league honors again. And he'll probably make all league as a senior this year. And him, and as well as his cousin, he had a cousin by the name of Damon Franklin. They both lived together. They sacrificed a lot in order for them to get what they wanted. In terms of Damon, another story, just to kind of shorten it up, his mother was in the process of finding a job. She ended up having to move out of state. Damon ended up staying with Sam at his aunt's house. And Damon just came in with the goal of, Coach Slade, I want to play college basketball. And I told him, I said, if you do everything you can in the classroom, I'll do everything I can on the court to help you do that. He graduated with a 3.5 GPA. He didn't get any big-time school scholarship offers, but he was an incredible leader for us, and he ended up going to College of the Canyons as a junior college. And he comes back, all the time, Coach Slade, thank you, thank you, thank you, because he believed in himself enough to validate his desire and speak on it with me. And so I would say that the lesson I would give most of the guys, for coaches and for even the kids hearing, just the desires of your heart are there. It's there for the purpose of you achieving them. That's the proof God gave it to you for it to be yours. But it is going to take a level of faith, and faith requires work. And so if you meet a couple of obstacles along the way, you've got to go seek the elders and go see what that's like. Well, the elders in our case would be the coaches. Go see those who know to figure it out. Holding it in, trying to do it yourself sometimes may not work, and it may be required within your work to figure out how through the eyes of someone else. So.
Yeah, that's a great story, and that it brings just a couple huge points of emphasis about, we have to, take a chance on some of these players and some of these students, and be the guide for them, and help show them a better way and a better path, and that it is possible for them to be successful, as long as they're willing to put in the work. And if we show them what that means, and here's the work that's required, and like you said, I'll do everything that I can if you're doing everything that you can. If both sides kind of have that mentality, great things can happen, and that's definitely what sounds like happened in this case. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
And so to wrap up, Coach, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox to get out a final thought, a final idea, just a closing message for our listeners, something that you just want to have stick in their mind. So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor for your soapbox. So go ahead.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate the platform and really appreciate the opportunity. And, the big thing I would say that I think has been really reiterated throughout the whole interview, man, it's just been your faith in God. And sometimes you've got to go and take a leap on that because you may not see it, at that point. And some of the things that we put in our list of things to do or things to accomplish and the goals that we want to have accomplished are just our words. It's not necessarily promised to us, and so they're not His promises. And so you've got to seek that structure on how to or seek God in the things that you do and the decisions that come up for you, and things will be revealed to you. For my young coaches, just keep grinding and be supportive of the programs, assistant coaches, and young guys coming up. You have your examples in Eric Spoelstra's and these guys who made it in the pros who started off, without real coaching experience and just worked their way up because they had the belief or they had the desire to want to do that and achieve it. And they did everything necessary for that to happen. And, that may include taking a break from basketball, spending more time, quality time with our families and trying to figure out our balance with what our given situations are. Having a supportive spouse while being a supportive spouse can help bring that balance. And, ultimately things will begin to fall in place, I feel, because of how you carry yourself and what you do. Others will gravitate toward that, and they'll want to be a part of that somehow, some way as well.
Yeah, that's just a great message and a great closing thought and words that are just so important to make sure that we revisit and we think about. And as I said at the beginning, it is really easy to kind of get lost in everything once you get into it and once you start coaching. But just being able to take a step back and really just think about what's important and make sure you're putting your energy into all of the things in your life that are really important, like you mentioned, and putting that trust in whether it's in your religion, your faith, or others, or whatever it is you need to do is to make sure that you're very mindful of those people and the things in your life that are really important, because basketball is but one part of our life, and making sure that we spend time to grow the other plants that we have in our lives as well. Great. Coach Slade, I want to thank you again for spending some time kind of going through your journey, your story, and just your insights about work-life balance and just achieving that happiness and loving the game of basketball, but at the same time also taking time for the other things that are important in your life as well. So, Coach, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck going forward. I wish you all the best.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, man. Anytime. And, I'm looking forward to what the future may have for us all. So it should be a good time.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.